apparently. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank y'all for coming and being in this big room with us today. Feel free to come on closer if you like. We are presenting Building a Stronger Community, Drupal Diversity and Inclusion. I am Tara King. I am a customer success engineer at Pantheon. Thanks to Pantheon for bringing me here to give this talk. I'm also on the leadership team of Drupal Diversity and Inclusion. You find me everywhere, Sparkling Robots, Twitter, D.O.
I'll be on these mics today. Thank you. I'm a content creator and mentor, so doing the content creation for Open Strategy Partners and mentoring for Drupal core. And I'm EKL 1773 pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about three things. At the beginning, I'm going to go over some important concepts in diversity and inclusion, just really a 101 kind of topics. Ellie's going to cover some statistics about our community and other developer communities, the global community. And then we're going to talk about Drupal diversity and inclusion, which is the initiative that we're part of. So first, I get asked a lot, why is it Drupal diversity and inclusion? What's the difference? What does this mean? I love this quote from Verna Myers. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So diversity is making sure you have a lot of different voices in the room, whether that's gender, race, ethnicity, immigration status, disability, religion, all kinds of things. But just because you show up doesn't mean you feel comfortable or empowered to contribute. So we try to focus on both to keep people both engaged in the community and keep growing our community. The reason we're so focused on this, well, the reason I'm focused on it is because I think it's the right thing to do. But there are other reasons to be involved. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. Diversity is shown to make teams more creative. So when you're working with a group of people that's all very similar to each other, it's often very easy to make a quick decision and move on. But when you're working with people who are different from you, you have to work a little harder. You have to find the right solution for those people. This quote, being around people who are different from us makes us more creative, more diligent, and hardworking. I think that's good for any project, whether it's Drupal or a company. Makes teams more collaborative. When people have different ways of communicating, different social sort of expectations, you have to learn to work together. It's always a good thing. And it makes teams more effective. There are a bunch of studies that have shown companies that are more racially and gender diverse perform better financially. They make better products. They're in the top 25% of their kind of cohort financially. So if that's like all you care about, it's still a good idea. Today, I thought Dreese's discussion about the open web and how it's for everyone really resonated for me in terms of diversity. If you want to make a product that helps everyone, you need to have everyone on the team that's building it. And so it's really important to me to make sure Drupal has that kind of diversity. Another concept that comes up a lot is privilege, and I know some people get uncomfortable with the word privilege. I know I used to get uncomfortable with the word privilege. Basically, it means advantages that you get because of something that is not you didn't put effort into, it's just who you are. There's this amazing article called Straight White Male, the Lowest Difficulty Setting There Is by John Scalzi. It's very long and very detailed metaphor, but he says basically, you still might not win the game on easy mode. Just because you're a straight white male doesn't mean you're going to just automatically succeed and everything will be easy for you. It does mean that the monsters you meet might be a little gentler. When you need help, it might be easier to get it. Meanwhile, you're a queer, trans person of color, you might have a lot harder time winning the game. So just kind of gives a sense of what's privilege, how does it work? Comes up a lot in diversity conversations. Intersectionality, kind of a big English word, is a word that was coined by this woman here, Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. She's brilliant, and she says, intersectionality is a lens, a way of looking where you can see power and how it intersects. So basically, it's not just a women's issue. If you just look at it as a women's issue, you won't be able to make progress on immigration or decolonizing any number of other issues. Another quote I really like is by Audre Lorde. She says, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because there's no such thing as a single issue life." None of us are just one thing. Even if you're a straight white male, that's not one thing, it's three things. So we really try to look at the full system of power and how those things interplay with each other. The paradox of tolerance is another concept we talk a lot about. So this was come up with, Karl Popper is the guy who invented it in 1945. Basically, there's a lot of questions around diversity work that shouldn't, if we're trying to be tolerant, shouldn't we tolerate everybody? And that everybody often includes very intolerant people. Nazis are the obvious example, but also the Ku Klux Klan in the United States. There are all kinds of groups, hate groups, that are explicitly opposed to others. And the paradox of tolerance proposes that you cannot have a tolerant society if you include the intolerant. And I think the act of deciding who's intolerant and who's tolerant can be difficult, but in my opinion, it's important to know your values and to draw that line. It's better than not drawing it at all. To oversimplify, if we were to make a Venn diagram, tolerance and intolerance cannot overlap. Intolerance will destroy tolerance. That's it. It's the whole paradox. Specific in tech is also the idea of how our values and biases generate, are part of the software that we make. I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, it's just a technical question. It's just PHP or it's just JavaScript. But it's made by humans. We do encode our biases into it. And we all have values. We all have biases. The problem is when you have a monoculture, I picked this up from Ken yesterday. When you have a monoculture, it's really hard to see the biases of the monoculture. So if it's all men or all white people, it's hard to see who's left out, whose perspectives are not included. This image here, kind of a provocative one, is from Facebook training for their hate speech censors. So people flag content as offensive on Facebook, and a human goes through and says yes or no. They specifically say hate content against a large group of people is not acceptable, but against a subset is acceptable. So in this case, this is actual training material, by the way. We didn't make this. Female drivers are not protected by Facebook. Black children are not protected by Facebook, but white men are protected by Facebook. I don't personally understand this, but this is being implemented across the globe. The other challenging part about software is that we build it to scale. And if we make that mistake scales along with the software. I don't know if you've heard some of these stories about visual recognition, facial recognition software where two people of Asian descent can open the same phone with the facial locks because the phone can't distinguish them. It's a terrible thing that really happens, and that's what happens when you have a monoculture building a product. And the last kind of big concept is inclusive design, which I think also came up a lot during the Open Web panel this morning. We need to be designing experiences that inclusively and consciously foster belonging. It's not about making something after the fact to kind of make up for something. It's about designing from the beginning with everyone in mind. This watch is made for both sighted and blind folk. And it's not, you don't need an assistive device. It's just inclusive for everyone. And now I'll let Ellie talk about some numbers.
Yay, numbers. So something we like to be specific about is that numbers can't really tell the whole picture, but it is useful to have numbers available to talk about, especially if you're presenting things to a team or executives or whoever. It's nice to be able to say, look, we can define this a little bit. But when it comes to things like self-reporting, a lot of folks aren't comfortable with filling out surveys and things, so take everything with a grain of salt, I guess.
Yeah.
So here's what we've got for numbers. I should say first, representation is being able to see somebody like yourself in leadership positions, and that not only shows you a potential path forward for yourself, but sort of lets you know that somebody who might have a similar perspective is included in major conversations, and you just feel represented. All right, so some numbers. We've got some non-random samples here, I think. It does create some questions about data validity, but these numbers were pulled for a US conference, so they're just maybe not as EU-centric as we would like. And if anybody out there actually knows where we could get some awesome data locally, that would be super helpful. So approximately 1.5% of free and open source software contributors are female, compared to 28% in priority software, and that's quite a big difference. Possibly an issue of reporting?
Possibly.
Possibly.
I'm guessing not.
So, yeah, definitely working to get more data in the future. But Drupal.org commit credits show 7% of all credits come from female, transgender, and other gendered people, which is an increase from past reporting, I do believe. But generally something to keep in mind is that LGBTQ people suffer lower education outcomes due to discrimination, bullying, violence, and higher unemployment rates, and also a lack of access to things like adequate housing, health services, and financial services. So it's a big barrier for a lot of folks. The open source community also has a bit of a history of being aggressive. So the findings here said that 18% of respondents had experienced negative interactions with other open source users. More women participate when there is a code of conduct. So, you know, here I am. Job decisions are often made based on contributions to open source. And if somebody doesn't really have the time to contribute, like they're involved with childcare or caring for their parents or something like that, it can be hard to get the time to contribute, and then following on to that, hard to get a position. So just something to keep in mind. And yeah, so open source contributing is more accessible to people with more time and more privilege. Again, women perform more unpaid labor. Childcare, caregivers, and women of color in particularly perform far more childcare than white women. And people with longer commute times are also negatively impacted and tend to be those who make less money as a result, just from commuting costs, housing costs, all kinds of things. And another challenge, especially in our global Drupal community, is finding all of this information. So we've just got a few numbers here.
I do have a German slide next, but it's not.
So these are the German numbers. And this is represented.
So yeah, this is from Wikipedia, just demographic numbers. They divided it by continent roughly. As you can see also, it's a bit challenging to match this up to the previous slide. It's hard to compare from one culture to the next because we don't have any kind of standardized data on these things.
And then disability is also an important concern. People with medical conditions are affected by an extended workday. It can be very exhausting for somebody with a physical disability or a mental disability. Just particularly if you're really anxious, a lot of social interactions can be a weight over the course of the day. So there are 500,000 agencies worldwide, a good portion of which are digital agencies focused on building websites and other digital products. Collectively, as a community, we have the potential to make a big difference in web accessibility for disabled users. As consultants, clients rely on us to make sound, educated decisions on their behalf about everything from analytics practices to good user experiences. So all of this data can be very helpful in informing our choices and decisions, but it can also be a bit of a distraction. The numbers don't always reflect reality, and sometimes the desire for quantifiable data can delay action and improvement. So it'd be more important to implement practices and inclusion than spend a lot of time hunting down the exact numbers. And we did have, let's see here. Yeah, I think that's about it. We've got the quote on the side there. Cutting accessibility from a project adversely impacts experiences for up to 20% of the population who use our products and services. That's pretty significant. I think it's back to you.
All right. So given the kind of dismal state of diversity in our community, we decided to change our community. I think a lot of you probably recognize Angie up here, Web Chick, as she's also known. Wrote a big document about Drupal community philosophies and reminded us that Drupal is a do-ocracy. So we decided to do something. When I say we decided to do something, I really mean Nikki Stevens and Karen Cassio decided to give a talk in New Orleans, DrupalCon. And I'll just let Nikki's words speak. She says the Drupal Diversity and Inclusion Group was started because we wanted to make Drupal a safe place for women, people of color, minorities, people who are differently abled or neurotypical, not neurotypical. Basically, anyone you don't see a lot of at community events. So after New Orleans, things got started. I think we have let Ellie talk about this.
Yes. So some of the issues we are working to address are listed here. It's not by any means an exhaustive list, but that is a start. I think we're making some progress. Am I talking about VCD?
Sure.
Yeah, so recently we started a virtual contribution day just in Drupal Slack, and that's an event. We've only done it once so far, hoping to do it more, but it was a 24-hour contribution time. We had some mentors available, we had some issues pre-selected to contribute to that were fairly simple to get started with, and I think it went pretty well. We wound up contributing to 9 modules and Drupal core, and I was really pleased to see a lot of mentors come out for that. And I'm looking forward to doing it again in the future, and hopefully we can do a little more recruiting and reaching out to local communities across the world and just all sorts of folks who'd really like to get involved.
Yeah, I think we were,
be here.
that particular format gave some attention to issues of classism. People can't necessarily afford to come to a big Drupal event. People who are maybe using a screen reader and it's going to be harder to participate in like a live in-person thing. Language barriers, it can be easier to translate via Slack than real time. Certainly it didn't address everything, but we're always looking for new ways.
Yes, the history of DD&I. So this is it. You can read for yourself here, but we've got May 2016 in New Orleans was our first DDI session and BOF. And that's right up to, things got really busy in 2017 around DrupalCon Baltimore. Sometime later that year, I started being involved a little bit. And then today we're here. We've had a transfer of leadership recently from Nikki Stevens to Fatima Khaled. And
Yeah.
Oh, and we had the Contrib team sprint at Nashville as well, and I think that went very well with you leading it. And we'll do that again this Friday. So if you're interested, I think there's going to be a table in the contributions room, and we'll get you started.
Yeah. So this is the DDI Leadership Team. Fatima down there in the blue is our new leader. This is Nikki, who founded the group. I put this slide up here for a few reasons. I think a lot of times there's this sense that Drupal diversity and inclusion is like a shadow cabal or something, a bunch of anonymous voices. We are not anonymous. We're very much people, and if you have questions or concerns or interest, please do speak to any of us. And the other thing I want to mention about this slide is that while we do have certain kinds of diversity, we have 3 men, 2 non-binary folks, and 4 women. We're not particularly racially diverse. We have some religious diversity. And part of that is, we come from the Drupal community. The Drupal community is mostly white. So the group is mostly white. We, I think, would love to see the diversity of voices on our leadership team grow and change, and hopefully soon. And we also acknowledge that there's a lot of work for white people, men, people in the majority to do. In a lot of ways, we're the problem, right? I'm a relatively well-educated white woman. I have plenty of privilege. There's plenty for me to do. So I just want to let everyone know who we are. I'm the only leadership team here, but there's 8 of us. There's 500 people in our channel, about 40 to 50 who participate regularly. So it's a pretty big group of folks. Is this you or me? OK. So we are undertaking a lot of initiatives. I think this is actually slightly out of date. We just announced some new ones. We have weekly meetings in Slack where you can come and contribute, find out how things work. We do a lot of work around big Drupal events to make sure folks feel comfortable. That's why we have the pronoun stickers. We do a lot of welcoming activities, try to organize social events for underrepresented people. Contrib team, which Ellie mentioned, is organized around helping underrepresented people contribute to the code base, because as we heard, 6% is a pretty low number, and in the Drupal community, we only track gender. We don't track any racial or disability status or anything like that, or at least not publicly. So that's the only data we have, but we are working on many fronts. We have an online resource library that we're going to be sprinting on tomorrow that helps collect and curate articles about diversity. We are starting some new initiatives around speaker diversity and around jobs, helping people find good jobs in the Drupal community, helping people who are hiring attract diverse candidates, that kind of thing. And we're kind of generally available if you're a camp organizer and you want to know how to run a better camp, come to the channel and we'll do our best. This is kind of a summary. You can come to our meetings. We do have an issue queue. It's kind of a standard Drupal process in some ways. The resource library, we're on Twitter. We have a website, drupaldiversity.com. Or you can join the Contrib team if you're specifically interested in mentoring and code-based contribution. And then here at DrupalEurope, we've got a table downstairs. If you haven't already come to visit us, please do. I also have our postcards up here if you want to come get some details to take home with you. We have a BOF, Birds of a Feather session, at 14:45 at 2:05 Palladium. That is totally unstructured. So if you have questions, if you want to guide the conversation, please come. It'll be an in-depth discussion driven by whoever's there. And then we will be sprinting. So if you can read or write English, we have tasks. If you are not great at English, but you have resources in your own language, we would love to grow the resource section of our library. And none of us, I don't think any of us natively speak anything but English. I speak some Spanish or some French, so we'd love to have that. That'd be a huge asset to us. And we're hoping to get a start on a religious holidays calendar for event planning in the Drupal community, trying to get folks who actually celebrate those holidays to let us know what's going to be a problem for them. And it's just going to be a first draft. Obviously, not everyone's here, but please do come. It's going to be a great time. If you've never been to a sprint, they're my favorite part of any Drupal event. Question time. It's my favorite. Do we have a mic? Awesome. Maybe I could just get a show of hands for how many questions. Does anybody have questions? One question. All right.
I might even have 2.
Great.
I was just wait, why is her name? Queen of open source, always wears a hat. PayPal. Danita.
Oh.
I was just hanging out with Danita,
Sure.
and this is not exactly a question, but she says there's a trend that they're noticing and trying to figure out how to deal with where the concept of being a duocracy is itself discriminatory against people who aren't alpha personalities, which I found a really interesting quandary because, of course, if people don't want to do stuff, then maybe they shouldn't have to either, right? But
Right.
I thought that was a really challenging statement in the face of how open source has worked so far. I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I do. OK. That post originally from Angie, where she calls Drupal duocracy, originally I believe she wrote meritocracy, and then there was discussion about whether or not meritocracy was discriminatory or exclusive, and she changed it. And I think there's a new movement, postmeritocracy.org. I think it's post-meritocracy.org, started by, I want to say someone at Mozilla, kind of a cross open source project, talking about the perils of this sort of meritocracy model and the duocracy in terms of access to the networks that allow those things, and the fact that it's just not built for everyone. But at the same time, we do need people to do the work. So I think part of our work in diversity and inclusion, like with Contrib Team, I feel very strongly that having Drupal credits on your profile is going to improve your economic outlook, right? People are going to want to hire you. It's certainly been true in my case. I want to extend that to other people, but it's also free work. And it's free work that's benefiting like giant corporations that aren't hiring these people. So I find myself caught in a quandary as well. Like, come do free work that I think will benefit you long term, but I can't guarantee that, and I can't guarantee the community will welcome you. So for me, I think I'm always trying to make it easier and to like do the many hands make light work philosophy. I don't know if you have anything to add. I don't need to dominate the questions section. You had a second question, thought.
Yep, I do.
Great.
And I have, through the last couple of years of community upheaval, right? Also observed the appearance and growth and maturing of this group, and I I want to applaud the positive and constructive place that you've gotten to, and thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you very, very much, you and all of your colleagues. That's awesome. And I think we're probably all prepared to celebrate you. What about presenting, and this is a question I've had for a while, I wonder how constructive it is to present this all as negatives. I wonder when you or we as a community, when we're allowed to actually turn that over and say, hey, we're not perfect, but look what we're doing and look how far we've come. And I didn't like that you said we're the problem, right? When you, of all people, right, are currently doing the most to address this and take us to a better place.
For sure.
So when does a positive version of this come?
It's a great question. I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court, and they asked, when is enough women enough? And she said, when there are 9 of them. And she's referring there to hundreds of years of history of women being denied that opportunity. So to quantify it, I think is a bit the wrong question. Like, when is it enough? Like, when has the change been happening? I think actually the work that we do on a day-to-day basis is pretty positive. And I would like to also know for myself. I don't know the answer. But I also think sometimes like 6% is so much more than 1.5%, which is where other open source projects are.
Correct.
That's fantastic. That is truly fantastic, and I don't mean to shortchange that. But 6% is a lot worse than the 50.8% that is women in this. So I'll say we'll be positive when things are positive. Okay,
I think as a marketing guy,
yeah,
presenting ourselves as the community that's doing something about this and doing an awesome job of
Absolutely.
it is much more appealing for more people to come and do it with us.
Yeah, I hear that. I also think as a woman, when I come into a space and I hear, everything's great here, everything's great, and I know that that's not true because of personal experience, I don't feel supported and I don't feel safe. So I think genuinely that the negativity is a way of helping people feel safe and welcome. But I hear you, and I don't mean to be a downer. Like, I think the Drupal community is a very optimistic place, and I love that. That's why I'm here. So I think we're trying to balance those two things.
Yeah, I will say that I also experience sometimes like a focus on the positives. Well, look what a good job this person has done, or look how positive this is. It can feel like silencing, because it's used as a counter-argument to real experiences that are people who are in underrepresented groups have, right? Like just yesterday, I was in this room, I gave a talk, I was not aware that there was a live stream. I asked that photos not be taken of me, I wear my lanyard. And the second comment on the live stream was something objectifying me. And it's like, okay, so great, super. Don't tell me that we're doing a great job. I mean, the fact that I have a pronoun sticker on my name badge and that we're normalizing that you know, being trans or cisgender, or it's cool that we have blank ones where you can fill in your own. That's awesome. That's amazing, and I'm proud of it. And like we can celebrate those things, but I think so long as we say, it's always followed by like, here's the things that we still see that are a problem, because then you have the balance. You frame the problem, you say, we are recognizing that the experiences that people have are real. We're not going to try to reduce a situation where someone is in a situation where they feel that, you know, there's like a not inclusive environment. Don't, you know, recognize those experiences first, give more volume to those voices, because those are the voices that aren't being heard.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, that was a great presentation, I think. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
I think just one thing that I'm thinking at the end of it is, so there's a lot that can be done, obviously, but I don't think I came out of this with as much as I would have liked to of maybe how I can approach things differently and what I can do to help. So there's great things that the community is doing, obviously. Not all of that is something I can take part in, I don't think.
Sure.
But it would be cool to hear some more stuff, maybe just in more abstract concepts and more things I can change my mindset to and things like
Sure.
that, where I can actually just help increase this issue, because it's often hard to empathize, especially in my situation.
Yeah,
lot of people.
anyone who wants to jump in on that too, feel free. I think for myself, trying to expand the voices I'm hearing, there's a lot of people on Twitter who are queer, people of color, women, who are very vocal about these issues. So I've kind of turned down the should it be React or should it be whatever JavaScript framework, turned that volume down and turned up the other volume. That's helped me a lot personally. And in terms of like, while you're here at Drupal Europe or we're at an event, I think try to notice in any given circle, right? Like I've definitely been at DrupalCons, and there's a group of people talking who are all men, and when I come up to join them, they don't open the circle, and I'm literally just left in the cold, you know? So just trying to remember that occasionally. Also, Nikki Stevens at, I believe, Baltimore, it's online on Drupal, on YouTube, gave 100 ways to be an ally. It's a fantastic talk. It's like 30 minutes long. It's this big. I learned 99 ways to be an ally. It was a really good talk. So I just think being here is a great thing to start. And then as you go through your day, like when someone says something, and I think the people that you're close to maybe who are marginalized, listen. They might, if they're close enough to you, they might be giving some small hints about ways that they're uncomfortable, and you might be able to find ways. But I'd also be happy, like maybe if you want to come to the BOF, we could talk at length. Thanks for the question. Anyone else? Did we solve diversity? Or are we all too like depressed? I don't know which.
We still have time.
So maybe it's a little bit of a contribution to his question. Maybe it's kind of an idea and just hearing about your thoughts. But I think that possibly something that helps with diversity is thinking about it in completely different terms. So maybe not even about cultural or ethnic or gender diversity, but in your daily work. If you're normally sitting with a team of engineers, grab a marketing person, bring them in the discussion, and see how they ask different questions, and they maybe get you to think a little bit different about the problem. It shifts a perspective, and I think building maybe tiny habits like that into the way that you work and the way that you communicate makes it a lot more natural that in other situations that you were describing with the circle, maybe that's it'll just be an automatic and natural behavior to want to bring in as many different perspectives as possible.
Yeah, and sorry, I don't mean to talk over you.
No, I guess that was more of a statement than a question, but I'm curious about your reaction.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you also start to see the benefits of knowing those people, right? Like, you get different jokes, and you understand things from other cultures, and like materially improves your life, then I think it becomes easier and it builds. But there's no magic pill or easy task. It's just long, hard work, rewarding work, to not be negative. It's wonderful work, but it is a lifetime of noticing your situation and trying to help your neighbors. Like, it's a very Drupal-y thing when you think about it. Anything else? I don't know if we have time for one more. One over here.
Hi. Sorry, my asthma is a bit.
No worries. Take your time.
I'm lucky to work at a job where the IT department is the only part where there are less women than men. And it's easy to be a woman in my company. But I find that it stays difficult to learn about other problems like people with disabilities and make the good products for them. So like we have several blind people in our company, so we can ask them, is the website good? Does it work for you? Does this thing?
Yeah.
But there are others, and it's hard to find help with making products good.
Yeah, it is hard.
And I think here we also have too many people who have never met someone who uses no mouse or...
Right. Yeah, I think any given individual, it's going to be very hard for a single person to always be aware of all the possible ways in which you might be ignoring someone. And I think that's where it's really important to learn what you can, to speak up for the people. Like, you know, I know a blind developer, and it changed the way I interact with things. And I certainly don't know more about other kinds of disabilities, but I think the more we can keep the conversation able to talk about things, to say, oh, hey, I think maybe you could improve this, without feeling the burden of like every possible. So I wish I had an answer. It is just hard, and you just have to be in community with people and hope that they can speak to bring up their needs. Wish I had a good
Might it be possible to, in future DrupalCons, to have some people from the accessibility organization show how they work and how they handle our websites?
I think that'd be fantastic. I would love to be. We have some accessibility people in our group, but not as many as I'd like. So if you wanted to, I'd be happy to talk more. And if anyone else knows folks who want to talk and demonstrate that, I think that'd be a fantastic addition to DrupalCon, or any Drupal event, really. Yeah, thank you. Anybody?
Just a note on the accessibility front. And we have had talks in the past about accessibility with Drupal accessibility. There was one that Everett, who used to be an accessibility maintainer, did on like accessibility in JavaScript a couple of cons ago. So there is content sometimes. I think one of the things, though, to keep in mind is that there are people both who, because of who they are, because of disabilities or different abilities they have, like making sure that we don't put the burden on them to show us how to make websites they can use, and things we can do to sort of mitigate that problem are like, if we want content that educates the community about the needs of different groups in terms of accessibility, pay them, give them sponsorships to come to the conference at least. So then it's not like, okay, come tell us what you need, come be our token blind person and show us how you use a screen reader. They have expertise and they should be paid for it. So that's one way that we can get that content in the future or keep that content as part of our conferences.
Thank you for that point. That's really, I think, a great one. We have 5 more minutes, so if anybody has questions, don't hesitate. Or just thoughts.
Okay, here's a question. So in my experience, I haven't always wanted, if there's a room full of men, I haven't always wanted to be seen as a woman. I just wanted to be one of the boys, and I just sort of, that's not what I want to draw attention to. So adapted behavior or change the way I dress or whatnot, because that's not what I want to be relevant in that moment.
Right.
Nor would it, and in that moment, I probably would have felt very uncomfortable if they're like, oh, we really need a woman's perspective right here. Well, actually, can I just be a person with a perspective?
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to think about how to formulate my question, but I guess it's, how do you approach learning and bringing that insight without making people feel uncomfortable for identifying and labeling for this one thing? Yeah, I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've definitely been in that situation where I'm in a room full of men and they say, it's so nice to have a woman here. And I'm like, I'm just doing the work we're all doing. It's not important. But I think, if you look at a lot of theory from like queer theory and feminist theory and African American studies, there are concepts of drag or code switching, which is about the way that people who are in marginalized groups switch, put on different faces, almost sometimes literally, to fit into an environment. And that's an adaptive strategy that those cultures have developed to be able to get along. And so in some ways for me as a woman, like just speaking to you as a woman, and to anyone here who doesn't maybe fit in, that was a really useful thing to learn. And to know that this is a normal thing, that there are reasons to do it, that it's not like weird. And then I was more able to choose if I was going to code switch, I have what I call my developer drag, which is I would go to conferences and wear a dress and like a hoodie and boots, like I wasn't super femme, and I was looking for work and no one understood that I was a developer. Like I couldn't get a job. It had an actual impact on me. And so I went to a male friend and I said, what's going on? And he's like, well, wear some jeans tomorrow. And I did, and everything changed. So there's a practical aspect to that. In terms of being on the other side of that, I think you really have to genuinely value the perspective that person brings. Like when it happened to me and I felt uncomfortable, it's because I felt like I've checked that box. Even though materially, my actual lived experience was not very inclusive. My colleagues didn't invite me to lunch. I was very much sat in a different area. They didn't, so it felt very box-checky. I think when you can actually build a relationship that goes beyond that box-checking, that's when you can start, then you can have those conversations, like, I'm so glad you're here. But I think when it's sort of superficial is the problem. And so I really, I would rather have one deep relationship at first with someone that, really supports them than check a billion boxes, even though it's slow. This work is slow. It doesn't scale like software scales. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a tough one. They're all tough ones in diversity work. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're about out of time. The BOF is at 2:45, 14:45, and 2:05. We can totally make action plans about how to do this stuff, whatever you guys want. I'll be there ready for you. So thank you so much for your time. It matters to have these conversations, and I appreciate that you're here. So thank you. And thanks to Ellie, who was very quiet at the end here, but is very, very wonderful.
Thank you for my diversity ticket.
Oh, yeah.
Sponsored me, so I'm here volunteering.
Thank you. We do have postcards up here if you want our Slack channel or a rainbow postcard that looks awesome in your badge. Thank you.